When we see the phrase, "I really tried to like this game," it's not hard for us to assume that, "and I couldn't," is the unwritten part that follows. If you check out Mandragora Whispers of the Witch Trees page on Steam, you are going to see that phrase verbatim all over the review section. I, on the other hand, would say that I really tried to like this game, and I did. After much toil, pain, and sweat, I finally ended up liking the damn thing. But they should have made it a Steam achievement, if I'm honest with you. Welcome to Ye Olde Entertainment. My name is Alex, and it is my duty, my mission, my purpose in life to help you decide whether that game that you have been plucking daisies about for so long is indeed the right game for you or not. And as some of you know, I review games using a system of categories that I think are relevant to the genre of the game at hand. And the game at hand today is Mandragora Whispers of the Witch Tree, which is a title that sits somewhere in between Castlevania Symphony of the Night and Dark Souls. Mandragora Whispers of the Witch Tree has been given the label of ARPG almost everywhere, and when it comes to those, these are the things that I personally care about: character creation and character progression. Mandragora Whispers of the Witch Tree uses a class-based system. You have 6 classes to choose from in the game, and they are pretty straightforward. They all come with a brief description that tells you about the playstyle that you are supposed to favor with each of them. And this is how it works. You gain souls in this game by killing things and completing some quests, and you can use these souls to acquire certain perks for your lantern, which we are going to talk about later, to upgrade your skills and to level up. So souls work a little bit like experience points do in other RPGs. When you level up, you get a skill point that you can use to progress further into one of the game's various skill trees. Each class has a skill tree with nodes that are either attribute bonuses or passive perks that improve your character's combat capabilities by building upon the class's core strengths. But these skill trees aren't exclusive to their classes. As a spellbinder, for example, you can unlock skills from the Flame Weaver's skill tree if you want to make the most out of those skills that do chaos and fire damage. Basically, your class determines your starting gear, your initial attributes, your starting skill, and the first skill tree that you have access to. But you are not constrained to your character's skill tree. You can unlock other skill trees over the course of the game, which means that you can build your character however you wish and multi-class to your heart's content. And this, in theory at least, translates into a broad array of possible builds. Skill trees don't have any actual combat abilities. You learn those by defeating enemies and purchasing books over the course of the game. And while these combat abilities are class related, they are not exclusive to your character's class either. In order to be able to use a combat ability that is not related to your character's initial class, you need to acquire the item that lets you use the skill. The items that you get over the course of the game also add to the build aspect of your character. Weapons, for example, have an interesting damage escalation mechanic. Your character has attributes like power, strength, dexterity, and others. Weapon damage scales with these attributes, and every weapon has different damage escalation stats. Also, weapons do different types of damage, so they benefit from some of the passive bonuses that you can unlock on the game's various skill trees. And this makes some weapons more relevant to your character's build than others, but we'll get into the specifics when we talk about itemization. I finished the game as a Vanguard in my first full playthrough, and the second time as a Spellbinder, multiclassing with Flame Weaver skills. I did resort to different tactics against many of the enemies, especially bosses. The game did feel somewhat different to play the second time around, and I liked that some bosses were significantly easier or harder depending on the class. That's the type of imbalance that I like. There are, however, a couple of things that I am not crazy about. First, the game still didn't feel too different to play the second time around. I still had to resort to melee attacks with my magic-based character a lot, and there was still a more efficient way to kill many enemies, and I often felt like I was being funneled into doing things in this more efficient way. When you played Diablo 2 as a sorcerer all the way through to the end, and then as a barbarian, it truly felt like you were playing 2 completely different games. You could beat that game as a necromancer and not swing your weapon a single time, and that's the type of replay value that I want from my classes in an ARPG. And second, there are synergies in this game, but they work silently in the background, and that's mainly because they come from passive perks that you unlock on a skill tree. There were very few skills that felt good to use in tandem, very few cool skill combos, if you will, in my opinion. Despite its 2D perspective, Mandragora is more comparable to a Souls-like game. And I think that, compared to those, it's still pretty solid. Not on the same level as Elden Ring or Bloodborne, but pretty solid. Mandragora also leans heavily into the metroidvania model, which means that over the course of the game, you unlock skills like a grappling hook, a double jump, and a glide ability, which allows you to access parts of the map that were inaccessible before. The interesting thing about these skills is that you can also use some of them to be more efficient in combat, which I think is cool. But while the game's map is pretty complex and some of the levels can get slightly labyrinthian, the game itself is mostly linear, which means that you learn these skills in a specific order. Not a bad thing necessarily, but double jumping and gliding are the two last skills that you unlock in the game. It doesn't feel particularly bad or tedious the first time you play the game, but when you play the game again after having grown accustomed to using these skills for both combat and exploration purposes, you are going to feel a little bit handicapped for a good chunk of the game. Also, because these skills are part of the game's critical path, acquiring them doesn't feel like much of an achievement. It is very satisfying, though, to go back to some of those places you couldn't reach before and finally get that treasure or access that room with that mini-boss that you couldn't get to before. You can upgrade your combat skills in Mandragora by spending some of your hard-earned souls, but they are just passive bonuses that make them a little bit more efficient. They never unlock new exciting ways to use your weapon, which is a bit of a wasted opportunity in my opinion. I would have liked to see an upgrade along the lines of, you can now use this skill while airborne, or something like that. Overall, I had a good time with Mandragora's character progression system, but I wish the game's wide variety of builds had translated into more unique gaming experiences. I also felt like it was missing a few more cool synergies. So good stuff, but just a little bit short of great. Gameplay. Mandragora Whispers of the Witch Tree sits somewhere in between Castlevania Symphony of the Night and Dark Souls. Splattercat said in his review that he felt the various mechanics and features that the game borrowed from Souls-like and Metroidvanias didn't quite gel into one cohesive whole for him. I can see where he's coming from. Graven and Mao Kenshi are excellent examples of games that borrow mechanics and features from several different genres, but distill them into a flavor of their own. I think in both of these cases, the developers thought about the type of experience they wanted to deliver first, and then thought of the mechanics and features they needed to make it happen. Graven is all about figuring out the game's challenges, so all of the game's mechanics were designed with a puzzly approach in mind. Exploration, combat, and of course puzzles require you to think about how to use the resources and tools at your disposal to overcome the challenge at hand. But Mandragora feels as though the devs wanted to make a game that combined Dark Souls and Metroidvania mechanics without giving much thought to what type of gaming experience as a whole they wanted to deliver. I described Mao Kenshi as an adventurous hot cuisine sushi platter, and I think of Graven as a nice stew with a unique flavor. But Mandragora is more like a sandwich with layers of mechanics and features from different genres bundled together. But I happened to like this sandwich. I didn't feel like it was a discombobulated mess of mechanics. Mandragora currently has an average score of 3.6 on Good Old Games and mixed reviews on Steam. And at first I didn't understand why. The game does have these absolutely horrendous entropy areas that everyone seems to hate, myself included, and corpse runs can be a bit of a problem. But I didn't think these things were bad enough to push this title into mixed reviews territory. So being the tireless researcher with lots of free time that I am, I endeavored to get to the bottom of the mystery of these low scores. And by means of a complex matrix of analysis of variables and indicators that I used to extrapolate the underlying truth from the negative reviews on Steam, I came upon a theory.
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
Depending on who you ask, Mandragora Whispers of the Witch Tree is a title with an identity crisis that is part Metroidvania, part Souls-like, but it doesn't fully commit to either one of these models, and because of this, it fails to live up to the expectations of Metroidvania and Dark Souls fans alike. Or a title that sits in a sweet spot between the Metroidvania and Souls-like genres. It adds a nice touch of character progression to the Metroidvania experience, and it invigorates the tried and true formula of Souls-like combat by throwing in side-scrolling platforming mechanics. So which one is it? Well, it's kinda both of these things at the same time. If, like myself, you happen to be okay with this middle ground, chances are you are going to enjoy most of what the game has to offer, except for this shit, probably. But if you are a die-hard Metroidvania fan, or one of those people who say Souls-like games are the real deal and that the rest of the games are for noobs, then you may find Mandragora seriously lacking in many respects. In Mandragora, you'll traverse the lands of Faildoom in search of a way to put an end to the threat of the all-consuming evil that looms in the horizon in the name of the King Priest. At least at first. Over the course of this adventure, you'll explore abandoned ruins, castles, and mines, you'll find ethereal passageways into otherworldly realms, and you'll walk about villages and settlements helping people out and hoping that they will, in turn, help you out with your own mission. You'll jump, climb, glide, and grapple hook your way through various different obstacles and hazards, much like you do in your average Metroidvania title. And you'll face a diverse selection of standard enemies, a not so diverse assortment of mini-bosses, and a few big bad bosses. Not unlike the ones you find in Souls-like games. There is a get good aspect to this game, which means that you'll have to learn how to parry blows, how to dodge out of the way of incoming attacks, and how to make the most out of light and heavy attacks and special skills and spells to best your enemies. And this is all great. Combat is weighty and snappy, and animations are tight. Jumping, climbing, and gliding actions are also seamless and responsive, and I never felt like I was wrestling with the controls or the animation, so that is all pretty good. But this game reminds me a lot of ActRaiser 2, a game that came out in the year 1993. In that game, you played a god who had to fight the demons of humanity, languor, jealousy, gluttony, and whatnot. And if I'm honest with you, that game was more out there. The level layout was more elaborate, platforming challenges were more varied and more creatively designed, and you could double jump and glide from the get-go, and many of the game's platforming sections required you to use these mechanics to get through. In Mandragora, you only really need to double jump and glide to access places that you couldn't get to before because of the game's Metroidvania design. Though to be fair, these skills are pretty useful in combat too. In ActRaiser 2, you had a dive mechanic that you could use in combination with your magical powers for a devastating effect. Also, the platforming in that game was a lot more difficult and yet somehow less frustrating. I died 142 times due to falling in Mandragora, and that was after I had already played half of the game with another character, so I supposedly already knew about most of the faults that can kill you in the game. I also died 68 times to traps, so we're talking about 210 instant deaths that occurred because I mistimed a jump, or took an ill-advised leap of faith to clear out a portion of the map that I wasn't supposed to at the time. And there are a couple of parts in which you need to be very precise with the distance and the timing of your jump if you don't want to suffer an instant death. Some of these parts are also very extremely far from the nearest bonfire, switch stones. So if you die in these areas because you didn't get the jump right, you're going to have to spend a good 3 minutes getting back to your corpse just to try that one jump again. And that's not even counting the entropy areas. Those deserve a special mention in this review, and whoever thought they were a good idea deserves a special place in hell.
Fuck you, you fucking fuckers.
Who in all fuck thought these areas were a good idea? These are parts in which you have a limited time to find your way around, and you can go left, right, up, or down, but there is only one right way to go. And I'm not entirely sure, but I think some of these areas simply can't be done if you don't upgrade your lantern. But more on that later. Looking up and down before you jump can give you a bit of a better idea of where to go in some of these locations, but you still have to do a lot of guessing, and if you go the wrong way, most of the times you won't have time to backtrack and find another route. These areas are also filled to the brim with platforms that appear and disappear at regular intervals, and platforms that disappear a second after you step on them. To me, the biggest evidence that these areas are just plain bad is the fact that I didn't feel good about overcoming them, because I didn't need to get good or to master a certain mechanic. It was all about exhausting a trial and error situation until I found my way out. Like I said earlier, you have a limited time to move around these areas, and the time you have is determined by a mystical lantern that you carry with you. And there are various ways in which you can upgrade your lantern, but they also require souls, which is the same resource that you use to level up and to upgrade your combat abilities. And this makes the whole entropy deal even more irritating. Every time I cleared one of those areas, I just felt relieved, and I always thought, man, I sure hope this was the last one of those. And if you do a little research, you'll see that I'm hardly the only one who thinks this way. I also don't feel like these entropy areas serve their narrative purpose either. The premise of the game is that your world will be consumed by entropy if you don't succeed in stopping the one who is bringing it about. So it's a little like the weirdness in Tainted Grail or the nothing in the Neverending Story. Tainted Grail Conquest does a very good job at presenting the weirdness like an all-consuming force of entropy that you definitely want to avoid. And when you have no choice but to walk into it, the game gives you a horrifying taste of what the world and its people would be like if the weirdness finally takes over. Entropy areas are just darker places with annoying platforming in Mandragora. As for the Souls-like aspects of the game, Mandragora uses bonfire-like mechanics. You find witch stones in this game, which you can use to rest and to replenish your health and your health potions. Every time you use a witch stone to rest, enemies respawn, and when you die, you are transported back to the last witch stone you used. So yes, witch stones work exactly the same as bonfires do in Dark Souls. One interesting thing about From Software games is that if you pay attention to the details and take an interest in the world and the stories of the games, you can unravel very obscure mysteries, gain access to hidden places, and maybe even unlock different endings. And there is a little bit of that in Mandragora. There is a post-ending quest that you can unlock and a couple of puzzly challenges that you need to figure out, though I wish there had been a few more of those. There are dialogue choices in Mandragora, and surprisingly enough, these choices can lead to different outcomes by the end of the game. They can even start new quests. This is not a big part of the game, but it sure is refreshing to see a little bit of player agency in an ARPG. As for combat, I find it interesting that skills like double jump and gliding, which you typically use for exploration purposes in metroidvanias, can be used as part of your arsenal of combat moves. And this makes those boss fights which come after you've learned these skills interesting. Unfortunately, you learn these skills pretty late in the game. Compared to bosses in most Souls-like games, bosses in Mandragora have a limited array of attacks and moves, so not all those who come to this game seeking a proper get good challenge like Bloodborne or Sekiro will get that itch scratched. But I found most boss fights to be fun and interesting. The game recycles mini-bosses a little too much, it has to be said. The final boss of the game deserves a special mention. That's right, that phase 2 took me a while to figure out, and then a while more to execute properly, but I finally managed. There is a difficulty slider for those who find combat a little too hard, and you can change it on the fly at any time. Do consider that corpse runs are very much a thing in this game. At least half of the bosses are pretty far away from the nearest witch stone, and at least 2 of those corpse runs are very, very nasty. The game features some exploration, but it basically boils down to finding the right path to your next objective and revisiting locations where there are areas that were previously inaccessible to you because you didn't have the right skills at the time. Some of the most inconspicuous areas in the game, which aren't inconspicuous at all if you look at your map, have special loot and chests that you need to have lockpicks with you to open. A lot of people seem to have issues with this, but I didn't. Just restock every time you go back to the witch tree and you're all set. You can fast travel from any part of the map to any witch stone that you've already discovered. That cheapens the adventure aspect of the game a little bit, but you can always have it as a personal policy to walk back to a witch stone every time you wish to fast travel. I think exploration would have been much more rewarding if hidden, non-mandatory areas had not been so obvious on your map, a little bit like it is in Grim Dawn. So, summarizing, the platforming part of the game isn't quite up to par with the best games in the ballpark, some of which came out very long ago, and the Souls-like aspect of the game lacked some of the moving parts that you typically find in most of the titles of the genre. But to me, the fact that Mandragora doesn't lean too heavily into any of its influences is a plus, but that may not be the case for everyone. I had a love-hate relationship with the game.
You have a love-hate relationship with everything.
But I loved it more than I hated it. The game was a little bit too short. The exploration aspect of the game could have been more rewarding. Corpse runs made boss fights significantly less fun than they could have been, and the game could have definitely done without those entropy areas. Overall, Mandragora Whispers of the Witch Tree was a good time, but not without its issues. Itemization. In Mandragora Whispers of the Witch Tree, there are consumables and items that you can equip your character with. You acquire these items by killing enemies, by purchasing them from vendors, and by having the artisans at the Witch Tree craft them for you. Standard enemies rarely drop anything useful. Early on in the game, you might find some use for some of the stuff regular mobs drop, but these items will become little more than junk to be traded for money very quickly. Also, loot drops are constrained to the enemy's type, so brigands, for example, will always drop the same brigand leggings, and set leggings will always have the same quality and stats. Like we said, Mandragora has bonfire-like mechanics, which means that enemies respawn every time you use them. And that means that you are likely going to have to fight the same enemies more than once. But because loot drops don't have randomized qualities or stats, there isn't much of an incentive to kill enemies that you have already killed, other than farming them for bounties or getting them out of the way in situations in which skipping them is too risky or simply not viable. It would have been cool if enemies dropped items with randomized stats. I like that vendors have decent items in this game. They're just not there to buy all the shit that you don't need. In fact, some of the best weapons and armor in the game are sold by vendors. So your final gear set is probably going to consist of epic quest rewards and items purchased from vendors. But even the best items in the game are just regular items with better stats. There are no set items with special bonuses, there are no items with special skills, or even bonuses to your combat skills. They all just have extra bonuses to your attributes, your bleed chance, your crit damage, etc. It would have been nice if there had been an item that had added some sort of ripple effect to your heavy attacks with great hammers or something like that. Over the course of the game, you can convince some artisans to join your caravan at the Witch Tree. These artisans can brew potions, cook meals, and craft useful items like bandages, armor patches, etc. Over the course of your journey, you find diagrams and materials that your artisans can use to craft special items. These items usually require the artisan to be a certain skill level, and they level up by crafting things, so the busier you keep them, the sooner you'll gain access to the best stuff in the game. You have a rune master as well, who can craft runes that you can use to enchant your weapons and some armor pieces. These runes give you extra vitality, strength, bleed damage, etc. Nothing too fancy, but it does give you a tiny edge in combat. Overall, I wasn't oh-boying about the itemization in Mandragora Whispers of the Witch Tree, but at least it added a little bit of variety to the gameplay. Story and lore. So apparently, a lot of people find the story in Mandragora Whispers of the Witch Tree to be meh or just serviceable. I think it is what it needs to be. Over the last decade or so, I have grown tired of overly convoluted, self-indulgent, pretentious story written by people who clearly don't have the chops to pull them off. I'm tired of stories that shower you with information dumps because the writers underestimate your capacity to connect the dots. I'm tired of the trope of the antagonist who turns out to be a victim with whom we are supposed to empathize, and who later becomes the true hero of the story. I'm tired of the forced plot twist that makes no sense. I'm tired of the wild stories that are wild because they break the rules of verisimilitude just for the wow factor. So yeah, I'm tired of all that shit. I don't mind a good straightforward story with a predictable outcome as long as the characters have believable problems and motivations and the stakes are high or personal enough for me to care. And Mandragora delivers all of this competently. You have a duty and personal reasons to see your initial mission through to the end, but over the course of said mission, you meet new characters who reveal new pieces of information. And these revelations send you down a new path and elevate the stakes. And that's perfect. That's all I need from a story in a game like this. But a straightforward story isn't in and of itself a good thing. It still needs decent characters to be good. And Mandragora has pretty decent characters. Even the most irrelevant NPC has something that makes him or her interesting, and everything they ask you to do makes all the sense in the world. But the best characters in the game are the ones that join your caravan at the Witch Tree. Over the course of the adventure, you meet people who found themselves in tight spots. Some are fleeing the authorities or the local town people, some are holing up in a loft trying to wait out a bad situation, others are simply trying to settle down somewhere, and others are just so freaking chaotic that you don't rightly know what's going on with them. So because they are artisans and adventurers with special talents that might prove useful, you offer all of them a place to stay by your caravan at the Witch Tree. These guys and gals have colorful backgrounds, extraordinary voice acting, and there's even a quirky, funny mystery aspect to one of them that you know is going to remain ambiguous till the end of the game. And all of these things make these guys and gals the very best thing in Mandragora, in my opinion. All of them are pretty good, but Geralt and Yrsa are the absolute standouts in my book. Geralt is an unreliable charlatan with a silver tongue and a knack for finding treasure who's conned half of Feldum and slept with the wives of the other half. He's shady but crafty, and he comes off as a rogue with a heart of gold, though you really need to dig to find that gold. He takes a liking to the other members of your merry little band, though he seems to like the female members of your band a little more.
I think a lot about Yrsa. I'm not going to repeat the things I think about Yrsa, but there's something about her that is otherworldly, don't you think? I mean, have you ever seen a more perfect set of marshmallows on a woman?
Speaking of marshmallows, Yrsa is another favorite caravan member of mine, and there are more than a pair of reasons for this. She reminds me of Covetous Shen, the jeweler from Diablo 3. Covetous Shen was my favorite artisan in that game because you could never quite tell whether he was a complete lunatic, some sort of mystical immortal being who just couldn't bother taking things seriously, or something in between. Yrsa is like the 2.0 version of Covetous Shen, and she's better in every respect. You can't really tell whether she's some sort of mystical being trying to pass as a human, or if she's spinning some tale for you to believe that she is not human. You can never tell if she's being sarcastic or naive, and you can never tell if her teasing is intentional or not. These are some of the things that your other caravan members have to say about her.
There is a powerful enchantment on her. I've known someone like her. Just accept. This is how she prefers to be seen by us.
Yrsa reminds me of a desert mirage. She entices you further, but once you get close, you realize there's no water at all. It's just a feeling, but I bet my life on my instincts.
And this is what she has to say about Geralt and his fascination with her marshmallows.
He is so transfixed by the necklace I'm wearing. Can't take his eyes off the area below my neck, in fact. He'll admire it from across the camp, that goofy grin on his face. Just comes up with reasons to chat just so that he can look at it.
When you ask her about Alana the alchemist, she says this.
The girl the cat brought here. I haven't spoken to her much.
And you would think, crazy old Yrsa. But then something happens in the game that makes you say, oh, okay. So Yrsa definitely knows more than she's letting on. She clearly sees stuff that we don't. The other artisans are also pretty good characters. Graham the cook is an insufferable, arrogant fool, but he has a lot of personality, and he's pretty hilarious if you don't take his shit too personal. Rhys is a mysterious rune crafter from a faraway land who can also see beyond everyone's mask. Shirin is a tailor with a colorful past, which she has good reasons not to share with everyone, and she's also not exactly hard on the eyes either. This game was clearly written by people who knew what they were doing, people who didn't need to stroke their egos, and the story they wrote is a simple, straightforward, unpretentious story with good characters and high stakes, and that's all you need in a game of this type, and that's good stuff in my book. Secondary mechanics and user experience. In addition to the game's core gameplay mix, there are a few other things for you to do in Mandragora. There's trade, inventory management, and crafting. Trade is important in this game because many of the best items are sold by vendors, so you need to keep an eye out for traders and make sure you complete their quests. Your artisans sell consumables like sharpening stones, armor patches, and throwing knives, and these items can make quite a significant difference in combat, especially for boss battles. Inventory management is crucial because you want to have the best primary and secondary weapon sets equipped at all times. And you want to sell all the junk you don't need in order to have as much money as you can possibly have. Crafting is interesting in this game. Your artisans level up, and the higher level they are, the better items they can make. Shirin can make bandages for you to patch yourself up, and armor patches to enhance your armor. And there are different item qualities available, so you want her to be able to make the best of them. Alana can make potions of all sorts, including health potions that you can equip in addition to your Estus health flask. And these extra health potions can make the difference between making it through that nasty boss fight or being ignominiously slain. You can also plant seeds on her garden that you can use to make offerings at the game's many altars to get extra talent points, or you can give them back to Alana so that she can brew potions with them. Reese can make runes that he can use to enchant your weapons and armor, and the bonuses you get from these runes synergize with your character's build. Don't expect runes like the ones you had in Diablo 2 though. Runes in Mandragora add simple bonuses that make you slightly more efficient at combat. Cooking is the standout crafting discipline in my opinion. There are various meals that Graham can make for you, and they can make quite a difference. Some meals can boost your maximum health significantly, some dramatically increase your stamina regeneration, your maximum mana, and even your health regeneration when you're out of combat. In addition to being very useful as artisans, these guys and gals also make exploration matter, because you find the rarest crafting recipes and diagrams in some of the most inconspicuous areas. Most of them are off the beaten trail, they can be easy to miss, and they can be hard to access too. User experience when it comes to the game's core gameplay mix is pretty good. This is supposed to be a controller game, but I played it with a mouse and a keyboard and I had absolutely no problems. Combat and platforming actions are responsive and snappy, and the only mechanic that I found a little bit awkward was looking up and down to see if there was a platform to land on or to jump to in some areas. Also, I wish there had been an option to change weapon loadouts and skills with one key. The map was also easy to read and useful for the most part, maybe a little too useful. So that's all fine and dandy. But the game's user experience when it comes to trade, inventory management, and skill management is absolutely horrendous. The PC version feels like a bad port of a game that came out for consoles first. Hovering over a thing to select it should never be a thing. Never. Never ever. Take for example changing the skills assigned to your action buttons. Dragging and dropping should have been the obvious choice here. I'm guessing dragging and dropping wouldn't have worked for consoles. The problem is that you have a PC version of the game, and that's the one I'm playing, and I'm using a keyboard. And in my book, if you make the game available for PCs and playable with a keyboard and a mouse, you should put in the extra effort that it takes to make the PC version friendly for PC users. And when it comes to inventory management, for example, that experience is character on the left with all the equipment slots visible in the right parts of the body, inventory of items on the right, and drag and drop mechanics or double click. Throw in filters and tabs if you have too many items, and that's it. Same thing for equipping skills. Drag and drop, or at least double click the equipped skill slot and double click on the skill you want to equip. But never hover. Hover is for tooltips, which this game is seriously lacking, by the way. Oh, you want to know what any of these icons mean, or how power, knowledge, or spirit work? Well, then it's glossary time for you. Overall, I liked many of the game's additional mechanics, especially crafting. I found the UX of the game in general to be pretty good, but to those who designed the UX of actions like trading and inventory management, I have to say,
Fuck you, you fucking fuckers.
Sound effects, music, and voice acting.
This is awkward. You got me, Inquisitor. Please don't tell Claiborne I've been the one letting my men into the city. He's quite fond of me. Buy his soldiers enough drinks and I can plan around their raids. But wait, what if I just ripped your fucking tongue out of your face and washed it down with one of Rosalie's best ales?
Oh, say, you looking for a guide to Wickham? I'm your guy. Gerald Burrough, adventurer extraordinaire at your service. Not cheap, but worth every penny. I'm currently banned from this city. Little misunderstanding in a dice game. And in Miller's daughter. But if you could put in a good word with Commander Claiborne, I'm your guy. Really? Oh, you are one in a million, stranger. Just remember the name, Gerald Burrough. But if anyone asks, please don't tell them where to find me.
Sound effects and mix are pretty good in this game. I love the ambience in Mandragora, and it would have been a crime not to have decent ambient sound to go with the game's amazing presentation. But while ambient sound is good, very good in fact, it's also a little bit thin in some areas. I would have liked to hear the sound of small tremors and maybe small rocks falling to the ground far in the distance when you're inside the abandoned mines, for example. Or that distant sound that you get in eerie locations in games like Darkest Dungeon 2 to really drive home that sense of foreboding. Cities and towns not only look busy and lived in, they also sound like it. Towns and underground locations like dungeons and mausoleums have a proper resonance effect, and the mix with the rest of the components is really good. Combat sounds are good and consistent with their actions, but I'm missing that holy shit factor that I get from other games. Crits need to sound and look more badass, more like they really make a difference. There should have been something like a quick small stagger animation maybe, and a special punchy sound to go with it. Something that would make you say, take that fucker. Music takes the backseat in Mandragora, and it's a shame, because it was composed by Christos Antoniou from Septicflesh and fully orchestrated and executed by the Prague Philharmonic Orchestra. It is of course vibe, tone, and theme consistent, but the narrative aspect is missing for me most of the time. There are a couple of notable exceptions. The piece that sounds while you're at Brer Castle has a theatrical, dramatic feeling to it, just like the boss you face there, and there are a few other examples. Overall, music is not bad in this title, but it's not the absolute banger of an OST that I was expecting given the personnel involved. Voice acting is where this game truly shines in the sound department, in my book. It's orders of magnitude better than what I expected from a game of this type. Mandragora features great voice talent, great voice direction, and great dialogue lines. You can hear everyone's personality coming through with every line, and the dramatic intention of every passage is spot on. And everyone's good, from the most important characters to the most irrelevant NPCs. Except these guys. And they aren't even that bad, they just clearly don't know how to speak English. Earlier this year I played Eldrador Creature Shadowfall, and I thought the hilarious voice work in that game was amazing. I thought it was going to snatch the 2025-year-old Entertainment Game of the Year award in this category without any trouble. And now I am not so sure. Overall, sound in Mandragora is very good, but voice acting steals the show in this department. Graphics. This is an absolutely gorgeous game. Simply amazing. Mandragora Whispers of the Witch Tree is one of the best looking games in the side-scrolling ballpark. It is a medieval fantasy themed game, but the game's artistic vision is unique and cohesive, so it doesn't come off as just another knockoff of something that we have already seen. When it comes to the game's locations, towns and settlements are the absolute standout. They look busy and lived in, and there are layers upon layers of detail that you can lose yourself in. Look at the nice little cave that Reese procured himself when he joined the caravan. This looks like a place where I would like to live in-game. For a side-scrolling game, this title has impressive depth. Character models are also fantastic, and this goes for human and non-human characters. There is a broad array of enemies in this game, and each of them has its own attack and movement patterns, but each enemy also looks distinct. Mandragora features character portraits, which is something that I really wasn't expecting, and they all look amazing. Animations are also quite elaborate and detailed, and that's part of the secret behind the game's snappy combat. But it's just not movement and combat that's great. Background animations add a great deal to the immersion aspect of the game, and they play nicely with the game's background sound. Items are perhaps the least impressive thing in the game. Your gear looks absolutely fantastic on you on the character's stat screen, but except some of the shields, items don't look as good in the game itself. But those are minor nitpicks to the visual aspect of an art package that is otherwise impressive. One of the best in recent memory, actually, in my opinion. Performance and stability. The current build is straight out perfect. I didn't experience a single crash, bug, or even graphic glitch. There weren't any FPS drops, and if there were, they totally flew under my radar, and loading times were quick. Bottom line is, I never thought about the performance in this game, and that is always an excellent sign. Other considerations and final thoughts. Mandragora Whispers of the Witch Tree is not the best metroidvania you are ever going to play, not by a long shot. It's not the best side-scrolling platform you are ever going to play. I haven't played those in a while, and some of the ones I used to play 30 years ago far surpass this one in most respects. And it's not the best Souls-like you are going to play either. It lacks many of the moving parts that make From Software games great. And as a side-scrolling game that combines mechanics and concepts from different genres, well, I've played better. But if you are an RPG guy or gal, if you are into medieval fantasy, and if you're not the kind of person who needs to be able to play as a non-human character, even if the game's lore itself does not have non-human species, if you don't need magic builds to change the whole flow of combat and add endless replay value to the experience, then Mandragora might just be for you. It features solid responsive combat that feels good to play, it offers a decent challenge, and it has a decent story with very good characters. It does have atrociously designed areas, 2 and 3 minute long corpse runs, and quite a few instant death situations. But for someone who is not too invested in any of the genres that Mandragora seems to dabble in, this is a pretty solid title. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, thank you for watching all the way up until now. If you like what you are seeing on this channel, please consider subscribing and clicking that notification bell to avoid the usual YouTube shenanigans. Come check us out on Discord if you don't mind all the boomer talk that goes on there. I personally love it and wouldn't change it for anything. And share the video if you thought it was cool. Bye everyone.
You're excused. You can go back to playing video games.